So Ben Caesar, who you both know, drummer for Brad Paisley, he said in a conversation that to be a really good top-notch sideman, you have to grow and evolve with the person you're backing, which I thought was really interesting, and not many people talk about that. And so I'm curious, how have you two grown and evolved with Thomas Rhett?
Sure. Yeah. Trav will probably have a further concept of this answer, having been here even longer than me.
But just slightly.
Yeah. I started my journey with Thomas in the middle of 2012. He was, a chubby-cheeked, shaggy-haired, kind of like country rocker, and that was sort of the part that we all assumed. In the backup band, it was Travis, myself, our guitar player Eric at the time, and there was the three guys, and Tom was lean and mean, as we would refer to those days. And man, it was really that was the bulk of what we did for a couple of years.
Yeah, and it was musically a much more raw kind of rock and roll vibe. Yep. You know, like more akin to like Led Zeppelin or something. Like he wanted to come and kick the doors down. Mm-hmm. You know, that's the fire, the hunger of a young artist, just like trying to make a name for himself. A lot of it, what we were doing in those first like 2 and 3 years was the very first opening act on big tours, so you get 5 songs. Mm-hmm. And to him, it was like, this is my chance to get 5 songs of me across to however many people have shown up at that point. And it was a lot of, you know, on stage pyrotechnics, like with the playing and the energy. Mm-hmm. And then that sort of got him a good footing as a live performer for a number of years. Everybody was like, man, if you bring this kid onto your tour, he's gonna, you know, really
pump up the audience,
pump everything up. Like he's got a fire to him. And then after that got pretty well established, and he'd put out, I think, 2 records. His 3rd record, I think, right?
It was Tangled Up record.
Tangled Up record, whatever number that was. That was when he artistically took a little bit more of a left turn to incorporate some modern pop stuff, more synths, more sort of outside the, like way outside the country box. You know, you had your traditional country stuff, and then you had more like kind of rock and bro country, whatever. Mm-hmm. He was the one who was like, no, I want this to be like a Bruno Mars, Justin Timberlake type pop country. And when that happened on the record, there was a very noticeable shift in his entire demeanor and approach to playing live, where it was like, no, we're gonna kind of tone down the, you know, stomping and kicking on stage and make it a little bit more of a tight musical operation instead of loosey-goosey, you know, swinging for the fences. And we had to kind of go along with that, and ever since then there's been a lot of like even more tightening, and production gets bigger, and that does change how we've had to approach the show as musicians as well.
Yeah, and I think that along with that, as songs were being fleshed out for what that new season of Thomas's sort of musical career became, he, you know, Trav and I both studied, you know, musicians, have gone through the university programs, and studied all sorts of genres, and the idea of, you know, working in pop treatments into a genre that we kind of were familiar with in the country world was sort of an exciting challenge, but, you know, tonally, for the guitar players, keyboard players, for Trav playing bass, drumming as well, integrating with electronics and tracks and playback and all that sort of stuff was, I think, something that we all had a concept of, but had never really been required to stretch out on the platform that was going to require it. And so, and it was a lot of listening. It was a lot of like time on our own, retooling what we did, and how to make it relevant and to serve what Thomas's vision was.
Can you elaborate on that? Because I'm not sure exactly what you mean.
Well, another way of sort of saying that is that we also, around that time, brought in a external MD, musical director, guy who's not in the band, who came in to help put the show together, and he was one who sort of pushed us to like, okay, we're going to try and get closer to these record tones and this kind of stuff, and brought a little bit of his know-how to that, and helped us really sort of flesh out these changes, going from like, okay, we're just jobbing sideman who landed on a pretty cool gig, to now, okay, this is an established thing, and we're moving forward artistically in a show with an artist who's moving forward with his career, and the MD worked with us, with our techs, with Thomas, and sort of helped retool a lot of the, just even equipment-wise. I went from playing through an amp that, blow your hair back to, okay, now I'm on like a guitar processor basically, and using that instead, and coming to terms with that as a bass player, like, oh, I miss my amp. And the guitar player is like, oh, we miss our amps. But trusting in this sort of process with the MD, with Thomas, okay, now you don't have amps, but it sounds amazing out front. So just trust in it, work with it, and it ended up working out.
Right. Although I would say the irony is, in some ways, you guys were perfect for this gig, and in many ways, he's lucky to have you, because as you said, you both studied. You studied at Humboldt. You studied at Berkeley.
Right.
You both, came from really intense educations and knowing music theory and all this kind of stuff. And then last time we spoke, you talked about how you had to become a little less intellectual about music when you hit the Nashville scene,
right?
Which I understand, the backbeat and the 4/time, but
Should we get that guy to be less intellectual right now?
right,
Yeah, right over there practicing.
it's mood though. It provides a good mood and atmosphere.
Another well-schooled guy.
Yeah. But and there's a lot of guys that can play backbeat and 4/4, but I think it seems like it was meant to be, in that when he wanted to change and go in a more pop direction and not just be slamming in your face all the time, you guys already had those skills that you had built up beforehand in that language. Were you able to then take what you learned from school and use that language here?
I think
more?
so. I think chord voicings became hipper, and the execution of different parts became more demanding and more specific. I think those are some of the types of things that we would have spent years, and all the guys in the band actually, I think at this point, maybe with the exception of one,
Right.
Reedy, who's just a savant.
Yep.
I think that's the approach that most of us in our musical journeys have had individually. Is scoping that stuff, and I think that is a pretty accurate statement.
Yeah.
So,
But and then it is interesting because when you guys do the big show, like you've done bigger than this, but when it's very much performance based.
Right.
And there's a lot of stuff going on that's expected of you. You are like running NASA mission control, where you are with all these triggers and everything. You are now also out on the catwalk and doing choreography and all this kind of thing.
There's steps.
Yeah. What I'm curious though is, how do you bring that show, but also make sure you're staying in the pocket? What's the key to balancing those two?
That's a good question.
I will insert that in the process of putting these shows together now, right? Where generally, historically, you may get together for a week or so and bang through the tunes. Maybe there's a couple of new songs you're going to work up and have them ready to go. We will now spend more in like the 4 to 5 week range prepping a tour, hammering out arrangements and parts, choreography, linking up with production, all that sort of stuff. The term we throw around here quite a bit is the idea of letting that bake in. Let's find that thing, own that thing, feel how that feels when it's right, and then bake it in. Let it be the thing. And so I think a lot of it comes from that time ahead, and those 4, 5, 6 weeks that we spend rehearsing are full long days of playing and set up in a rehearsal space or in a room or whatever. But that also, I think, is a lot sort of mentally going on for each of the guys in the band, right? Like, you want to say you're going home to have dinner with your family, but your brain's still working. You're just you're kind of in it.
In that rehearsal time. You're fully immersed for better part of like a month and a half, just thinking about the show, and then that bakes in, like you said, and at some point it becomes muscle memory, like all of it. There's there's a warm up routine before the show. There's sort of a cool down routine after the show, and all of that plays into making sure that the performance, musically and visually, happens within reason the same every night, because there's so many production aspects. There's lights and lasers and confetti and stuff blowing up on stage, and it's all this like huge group choreography, right? You know, that revolves around music. It's a very music forward type thing. That's something that TR's always said. He's like, man, you know, we've got all these production elements, but we want the music to be the main thing, which is great for us and hopefully the fans.
Yeah,
you know. So, there's a give and a take, you know, where he's like, okay, maybe I want you guys to do this dancing stuff during this crazy part of the song, and I've had to actually push back once and been like, I can't do that. Like, I'm really sorry. I want to be able to do that, but you've got me going like this, and you want me to do like line dancing, and I can do one or the other. You make the call, but I can't do both. You know, you have to push back at some point, but you try and accommodate his vision as an artist and your boss and all these things. And
Yeah.
Okay,
and then another kind of yin and yang, because you do these parts of the show with these humongous production elements, but there's also where you've had concerts where you're on a little remote stage, you with like a cocktail kit or a cajon or something like that, or I saw you guys did a live radio show where it was just really stripped down. What's more challenging, the big production stuff, or when everything is stripped away and it's just like 3 or 4 of you?
Man, those stripped down experiences, they are a fun thing. From my role, sort of, quarterbacking a little bit of these performances and things, those ones are stressful. Those are really because we honestly, logistically and realistically, it doesn't make sense for those experiences to be baked in as much as the 6-week rehearsal of tour, right? So while you may be playing the same notes or doing it's like, man, you do end up having to cover some more space. A lot of times there's not a chance to rehearse those experiences, and so you're really leaning on the musicality of the guys in the band, and there's an element of danger there.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say there is a little bit of seat of the pants about some of those things. Like this year we did that Bridgestone thing first on the day his record came out. It was like a live stream on YouTube, and there's like 8,000 people in the arena, and then there's us on stage with like no gimmicks and like not our normal gear, and just sort of like, here we go, see you at the finish line, you know, which can go really great or really bad depending, but TR is also really great in those settings. He can really lead that well, and his songwriting and his sort of personality and his charisma can fill in some of the musical gaps that we're so focused on as sidemen. You know, we're like, oh, this is not right, but we're gonna just go with it. Oh yeah, right. The audience doesn't care about that. They're here for him. Yeah. And he fills in those gaps. He talks more, and he sort of has a really great, connection to an audience that carries a lot of that stuff for us. But we still have to think about it. You know, it's our job to worry and stress whether or not it's going to come across right.
But no, I totally understand the aspect of the audience not getting it, the average person not seeing what was a glaring whoops to you, was not noticed by them at all. And I think that's one of the things that separates professionals from pseudo-professionals. And here I'm talking about people who are on those singing contests, is I've seen them in shows where they don't have the chops, the experience of being in an environment where things may go wrong, where mistakes happen or equipment fails and that kind of thing.
You gotta shake it off.
Yeah, and I've always been impressed with guys like you that it's you're able to roll with it and make it seem like nothing even happened.
Yeah. No, that's certainly part of it. And to your point of like a crowd not always being hip to, maybe some of the subtlety or nuancy sort of stuff that may be sliding by in those situations. It's like, man, I am ultimately thankful that they are not hip to that stuff, right? It makes they're blissfully unaware. Right. The boss is up there. He's a wonderful entertainer. He connects so well in in all of these settings, but those stripped down things when maybe we're feeling a little more exposed musically as a band, and are we covering the parts? Are we serving these songs the right way? we'll get through them, and man, we've had a few like, whew, like shake it off, and you see the reports and the reviews and the things. You're like, well, I guess they liked it.
They liked it. All right, cool.
So yeah, you kind of just have to learn how to roll through those. But I think each of us, Trav and myself and the other guys in the band, are, I think, really thankful that that there is a bit of that accountability and that commitment to and that aspiration to be the best that we can, even in those situations. And coming off stage when maybe it didn't go quite like you thought it was going to, or as you'd hoped, man, there's inevitably going to be some frustration about it. And I think that we've each probably found each other in situations going, hey man, yeah, that was brush it off.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep going. And you're like, you're right.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, there's some brotherhood around that serves us all really well in those foreign spots.
Well, and then talking about nuance, my vision's going. When I spoke with you last time, you talked about. You said, and I want to make sure I get this, exploring dynamics and subtleties of nuance gives depth to how I can treat a backbeat.
Sure.
First off, can you elaborate on that? Because I don't think we really fully covered how that happens.
Yeah, I think so. Even just in how we're treating some of the new material that we're playing on this tour, or as new songs come through, there's a lot of information, right? When you listen to the final mix of a record, we were chatting about this earlier today, approaching a new song and soloing out individual parts, and we have the ability to do that and listen back to what was played on the record or how this went down. And you go, man, all right, well, it's not how it feels at the end of this thing. And so, by the time it goes through its journey and becomes part of a final recording, a released mix or master, there's a lot of stuff in there that makes it feel like it ultimately does. And here on our side, on our live treatment side, we do have the luxury of some track content to support what we're doing and to augment what we're doing. And that's a part of some of the subtlety and nuance even that exists in there. Can sort of highlight or undermine what you're playing on your instrument. I think also the idea of some of the subtleties and nuances that as a drummer, I'm sure Trav would agree, playing bass, but like there are things that would be just as easy to skate right by playing wise, that you kind of have to stand back and look at this sort of bigger picture of this experience, of this musical moment, and know that how maybe you're pushing or pulling on a pulse, or how you're dynamically approaching certain parts of a song. They may be supporting. I mean, ultimately, we're going to support the vocal. That is our goal. But man, they also may tie into another part of the content that we're playing along with in the track world, or a tone change that's coming from a keys or guitar or bass world or something like that. I have to be mindful of those things because they are subtle changes, and we could just kind of whack our way through it and probably be fine. But I don't know that. I think that approach may diminish the return. And so, there's a lot of attention to detail is kind of where that comes down to. I mean,
and to add, to add to that point, like the music forward sort of mentality of this whole thing with the giant production. I mean, the people that are hired to do front of house and the guy that we have doing monitors, and they're all sort of aware of these things. They're not just like, all right, here's my blueprint for everybody. It's like, okay, this is specific to each guy and each song, and this artist wants these dynamics. And we've got some really talented people working on the audio side of things, and our backline techs, like our crew is really great, and they're aware of these dynamic pushes and pulls on some level. I mean, our playback operator guy who has the tracks, he's a very musical guy. He's essentially a member of the band. So when Chris is working with him on these kinds of things we're talking about, the feel here, that we've got all this content in the tracks, but it's not really working. So can you pull this stuff out? And he'll sometimes intuitively do that, where he's like, yeah, you know what? I'm hearing this against what you guys are playing, and it's not working. I'm going to pull it out. It's like, great, do that. Okay. Front of house engineer guy, for a long time, we worked with a couple of different front of house guys, and it never felt quite right. And we've landed on a guy now who's tremendous, and it feels necessary to play with dynamics, especially as a bass player. A lot of stuff gets lost in the haze between the banana speakers and the back of the grass out there. It's like, okay, whatever, it's just going out. But no, it's all being heard. It's all there. We get a lot of positive feedback from people who are like, man, for all the stuff you guys have going on up there, you can hear everything, which puts us kind of on alert. Like, oh, you can hear everything. Great. That's great. That actually forces us to play dynamically and pay attention to pocket and grooves. As a rhythm section, it's like, hey, you could just go through and play to the click and be in your own head, or I could listen and play music, which is ultimately way more satisfying. It helps everyone grow. It helps the whole thing. It's part of the whole thing to play musically instead of just whacking it out and hoping for the best, which you see a lot. If you do enough of this and a lot, go to some festivals and see some, acts that you didn't realize were just kind of banging it out up there. And you're like, oh, wow, okay. That gives a little bit more credibility to what we're doing, actually.
Right. No, and I mean, as we've discussed, because again, the bass it's not like a guitar that cuts through everything and screams, pay attention to me.
Right.
It's
just bass.
It's just bass.
It's just bass.
That's the joke. That's an in-camp joke.
Yep.
But, so it is, there's nuance naturally to the bass.
Right.
And then I've seen footage that you've posted, like, on your Instagram and things like that, from behind.
Yeah.
And it's like, he's actually using his left foot, right? Because so many drummers never use, a friend, Rich Redmond, calls it the forgotten foot.
Yeah.
So many guys, it's like their leg went to sleep and they just dropped it. And then, but, I was looking at footage and it's like, you're here working the toms and then you got the rhythm going with the hi-hat. And I'm like, wow, and if you're listening to it, it does add a little extra layer. But what you're saying is, even if you can't hear it, it's influencing the people on stage.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep. That's exactly it. And that I think that even finding ways, sitting in the drum chair, but like between that or playback or how we're all monitoring things, finding ways to sort of glue everyone together is a really important deal. And it's so much easier when you've got guys who are listening and actively listening to take care of their role in that equation. But yeah, I'm always looking for ways to sort of glue my own body together to what's happening rhythmically, and then hopefully that even if maybe that left foot splash that's going on the upbeats or whatever else maybe doesn't punch you in the face when you're sitting out front, you kind of know it's there, and maybe you know it's there because of how it tied into the guy doing the thing on the upbeats on the chorus of the guitar deal. There's something there that's going to support it, and not to say that you want to account for every single subdivision all the time, but having some of those types of things can really, I think, be a pretty dramatic impact without being like, the front of your ear palette.
Yeah. And then to switch gears just a little bit. So you, as in the collective you of Thomas Rhett and his band, you guys are known now for very much stretching the definition of what country music is. And I think there's a certain irony there because, again, you guys came from these really intense music educations, none of which screamed, they're going to country,
Yeah.
And here you are backing up this country artist, but now it's like it's swung around, and it's, your artist is exploring all these other pop influences and things like that, and pushing things, which, again, I think you guys, your background is perfect now for that. But what I'm wondering is, how much of it is intentional and how much of it is unintentional in terms of, all right, let's see if we can push this a little bit?
Jeez.
I would say a lot of it's intentional because we're essentially like Swiss Army knives for him.
Yeah.
He's the one driving the ship, He's the one making the calls and saying, these are the songs I wrote. This is how they're recorded. I want to bring this into the live show. And it's like, okay, well, that sounds like a country song. That sounds like a Prince song. That sounds like a rock and roll, like Mellencamp song. So, okay, we'll start there. And that's his call, though.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he ultimately just feels comfortable knowing that we're able to be those Swiss Army knives for him. He can say, all right, in this part of the song, I just want you guys to double time swing for like 8 bars.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Double time swing it is. Let's go. You want to be ready to do anything that he wants. And that's true of TR, but it's true of any major artist, I think. Like if this all went away tomorrow, I would put myself out there as like, I could do anything. I can play country music, I can play pop music, I can play funk, I can play rock, and I did it all on one gig at one point. So if you want that all on one gig, I could do that. We can do that. That's fine.
Yeah.
But it's very intentional, I would say. Every now and again,
Yeah, I would say for the bulk of it, you're absolutely right. I think there are bits over the course of the years that maybe were a little more, I don't want to say accidental, a little more accidental, whimsical, whatever, but like we'd, by nature of just playing a whole bunch in sound checks and things, and all of a sudden, or heard a thing last night and you listen to the tape, like, hey man, what if we did that again? And so there are some of those types of things that do happen that maybe, whether they are, whether they're a super poppy sort of quote from a tune or a more of a rock and roll thing that just shows up amidst a tune that was a pop tune. Some of that stuff happens, and just by being around each other so much playing. But I think, Trav's right, man. Most of that is pretty intentional, and has to be at this point. It's not. We're not. We're not just out there interpreting every night and hoping that it translates and that the production to support it can also catch up. It's a pretty calculated, dialed in approach. So
Yeah.
I'd say intentional is the
we're not 4 guys on stage with like a couple of lights on sticks at a county fair anymore.
Right.
And then back then it was like kind of anything goes.
Right.
No, there's so many moving parts that it's like in those production rehearsals it's like, okay, this is what we're going for. We're going to stick to this, and that's where we're going to stay. Okay, cool. Well, there we go.
Yeah, but I mean, even just having the courage, because there's so many people to be like, all right, this is my lane, I'm going to stay in it, or there's been a lot of debate over, all right, is this country music, is it non-country music? And so I think it's cool that you guys are willing to take that risk of, we want to do something a little different. We want to push things a little bit more, and and show that you can have this fascinating hybrid, and it works.
Yep. I give a lot of the credit to straight up to Thomas with all that stuff. He had a vision for this thing, for the records he was making, and how he wanted to treat those live, and then to have a band that I remember early days working with an outside music director, a gentleman from New York, Dave Cook, that we've been working with for several years, who we just think the world of. I remember having one of our initial meetings with him, or phone calls or something like that, and chatting with you, Trav, about what I was expecting it to become, or what I thought was this experience was going to be like. And it was like, man, we were going to make the transition from being like a bar band-ish. Not that we were a good
bar band plus.
But it was going to go from that to a show band. And that was the transition,
Totally.
and it was going to be, whether thankfully for me, this is not a gig that exists on the Lido deck on a cruise ship, but just catching whatever they chuck at you and being able to own it, and that was the thing, and that was a lot to just tip my hat to Thomas as a leader for that and his vision.
And then, do you think that's going to become kind of the norm in terms of, because there's a lot of great musicians out there, but there's a lot who are just good at one type of music.
Yep.
Is it going to be, do you think more and more it's going to be like, we need someone who can legitimately play at least a few different styles?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer. I would like to think so, because again, coming up as schooled guys, there's always this sort of benchmark of like, man, when I was coming up, like the top of the pile is you play in the Tonight Show band or something like that, where you're in a show band and you're getting thrown charts every night and you better be able to play everything. If you want to work and make money and support a family, you play everything and you play it well. I don't know that benchmark is still there necessarily because, you know, the industry's changed, the money's changed. You know, the type of music that's selling right now doesn't necessarily revolve around people. To be honest with you, it's a singer and a computer, a lot of it. Yeah. There's guys who go out and play it, and all respect to that, you know, but I don't know that there's going to be a ton of call for type of thing that we're doing, show band, you know, being able to cover 5 to 7 genres in a night in an amphitheater. Like, there's some people still doing it, but I don't see it going that way unless there's sort of a big culture change.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd agree.
And then one other thing I wanted to hit on was something Travis wrote in a post a few months back, where, well,
what time of night was that post?
Is this on the weekend or
right,
during the week?
You were nude, strangely, but no. No, it was the NFL draft had come to Nashville.
Right.
And there was a big stink because, you know, they wanted entire trees moved. They wanted to reshape the earth, you know, to make it work. And what you pointed out in your post was growing up as someone who was in the high school marching band and got this constantly where it was specifically football, but maybe, you know, another sport in general, always was top dog. And you said even our team absolutely sucked, but they always got the priority over band and that kind of thing. And the band was always kind of second tier. So
probably fourth.
An afterthought either way.
Yeah.
But to talk about the importance of that experience in your background, I mean, when you take away, you know, the stadium shows from the equation, and what did you get from that early music education and experience?
Great question. First off, like I said in the post, I think point was like my high school band, marching band and jazz band, because I was in both. I was actually a tuba player. I was low brass section leader. I'm like I'm a true nerd. So, but our marching band, we were in a 5A system, which is huge, especially where I grew up in Texas. I mean, we'd be competing against 600 kids in a band. My little dinky marching band had like 150 kids in it, and we'd win contests, you know, with no funding, because all the money was going to the football team, who were terrible. And it was like, okay, cool. It doesn't matter, I guess, is what, to answer your question, the educationally or experientially, what I learned is that good music is good music. Good performance is good performance. You don't need to have a ton of money behind it. If you're good, you're good. If you're not, you're not. And it shows. You can have 600 kids on stage with on the field with the crispest uniforms and the shiniest instruments, but to them, they're not hungry. You know, they just sort of assume like, oh, well, the band boosters have given us all this money and we're doing great. We're going to be fine. And they go out there and they just kind of, you know, go through the paces. My little dinky band with our terrible uniforms and like smelly uniforms and dented horns, we would go out there hungry, willing to show them up. You know, like, hey, you guys have all the money, but we want this. Like, we really want this sort of underdog, you know, mentality. I carry that with me still. It's sort of weird. Kind
of inspired the first bunch of years of
working
with Thomas.
Honestly, because like for the first couple of years I was band leading, and I eventually passed it off to him because I had kids and I saw where this was going and I wanted to be able to sort of put some separation and whatnot. But in the early days it was like, you know, let's go out there. We're just 4 dudes on stage. We don't have lights. We don't have nothing. Let's just go kick the doors down and show these, you know, headliners that we're opening up for that we got it.
Yeah.
And that I will say that directly came from this weird high school band experience, and I carried it onto this gig. I mean, we used to get really riled up before shows, you know, like, let's go show them, let's kick the doors in, you know, like, and
we did.
And we did, man. It was fun.
It was really fun.
But yeah, that that coming back to the point of I wanted to make that it doesn't matter with all the production. We could strip away the lasers and the confetti and the explosions and the lights and just put all of us on stage with our audio gear, and it would still be I would be very proud to put that show on. Everything else is window dressing, and it's cool, and it's fun for the audience and everything, but I'd be very proud to go out there and do that show without any of it, and I think TR would too.
I agree.
And then, were you in band in high school as well?
Yeah, I so growing up in Canada, the marching thing was not. I'm sure it existed, but I was in a tiny little school. You had a marching band of 150. I had a graduating class of 12. So I was in like concert band through grade school. It was required you to join in at grade 5 or something, and then did the concert band and like the jazz band or whatever through high school. As high school started up, I was far from a cool kid in school, and I really didn't really care much for my high school experience. It was sort of tedious and largely unfulfilling. And so around the second-ish year of high school, I was tight with some professors, and my band leader or band director guy was a good friend and kind of take him under his wing. So I was studying outside of school, at high school, taking lessons and trying to gig as much as I could as 15 years old or something. And so I was able to streamline the rest of high school. I got out of it in 3 years. I was able to start Humber when I think it was like 17 or something. Because I just knew that was where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And so I did some extra credit kind of stuff or some correspondence course type of things or whatever it was, mashed up all the credits I possibly could and got out after 3 years. But my experience in band there, it was just music. There was nothing else. There was no other appeal for me. We didn't have the pomp and circumstance of like the marching band and the football team. I didn't have any of that stuff. We wouldn't get chicks. Like that wasn't it. And
because the tuba players got all the chicks.
Yeah, these guys. So but it really was for me. And while I totally get along with what Trav was sharing about his high school experience and kind of looking across the party line at the other band and being like, man, we got him. There was no career concept. There was no competitive concept. There was no, I'm better than that guy. I just loved playing, and I wanted to get through and get onto just playing more and studying music. And so I found myself in university at 17 or whatever. Still didn't know like that you could make a living, and my professors were professionals making livings, but they were handing out flyers to their gigs after class, which is totally cool. It was great. I as I started to piece it all together, I was like, well, that's interesting. And then I would catch a show like a theater thing or an arena show somewhere, and be like, wow, like there's drums and there's lights and I saw tour buses outside. What's going on with this? And it's just sort of like my concept was kind of forming, and then I ended up seeing a Nashville-based gig that had come through Toronto at the time, and I poked around and found some names, and this is before any social media stuff, I guess. I just tried to like search the internet and find out who these guys were, and it turned out everyone was based in Nashville. So I went to Nashville. So I got out of Humber and I actually finished at Belmont in Nashville a couple of years after.
Did you finish?
Yeah. No, D's get degrees. My more or less proud bit of educational insight is that I toured the whole time I was in school in Nashville, 3 years. I toured to pay for school. So I didn't have any student debt. I also just didn't have very good grades.
Okay.
And the day of graduation, I will never forget. To tell my folks I wasn't going to do the thing, and they're like, but you're graduating. We want to be, I had a gig in Phoenix, and they sent a cap and gown, and I wore it on stage that night.
I don't think I've ever heard that story.
Like $300
You
a night
played
or something.
with it?
Yeah, I did. So,
wow.
And the guys in the band were cool to make a thing of it. So, yeah. slightly different experience than Fort Worth, Texas.
Just a little.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, and so I've taken you way beyond what I said I would,
Right.
but I always like to throw this out there, just because people get asked the same questions again and again. Is there anything you wish people would ask you about your work that no one ever asks you about? Like, oh, they're always asking about, well, Thomas or the big show or the award shows, but I would really love to discuss X.
Yeah. Man, I think that there are maybe a little different for me. It's just me. I'm not there's no family attached to my life. But one of the things that I laugh about a lot, actually, with the guys I travel with and other musicians in the community of working musicians, well, I don't know about interviews and I don't do a ton of interviews, so I don't really know. But the idea of, man, I wish they'd have taught that in school, right?
I was literally thinking that.
Like,
I was gonna say the same
studying
thing.
music in school, man. We got good at sight reading and ear training, and we all passed piano proficiency, and we all blah 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 blah. But we had no concept of what it is to be like a working musician.
Right.
That was just left out of all the educational stuff that I experienced.
Oh,
and I mean, like
same.
the real world side of things, like
Okay.
how to budget your life, you know,
Oh.
where to spend money, where not to spend money, what you do and don't need as far as equipment, how to hang out, you know.
Wait. How to hang out?
Oh man, this is
Yeah.
80% of this gig is hanging out, man.
Hanging
Right,
chops.
but you think people need to be taught how to hang out?
You just need to know about it. You need to know that that's a concern.
Yeah,
that that's
right.
a factor in this equation.
Yeah, that like just shredding all day and sight reading all day does you no good if you're really hard to be around.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So
It's
there's
true.
Yeah, and there's a handful of times, you know, where you'll encounter somebody who maybe is riding one of the buses for the first time and doesn't know like tour bus etiquette,
Right.
or
Things they don't teach you in school: how to shower on a bus while it's going.
yeah,
That's a skill set.
that's a skill set.
They could set up a room and just like shake it and
Right.
stuff like
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
exactly. Or even just letting you know, like maybe one day you're gonna have to shower on a bus
Right.
or a train or whatever. You know, like
Yeah.
It's true that is something that I was thinking about too. Like nobody ever asks, like, what are the things that you wish you had known?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and everybody has that, right? Every sort of trained profession. Like my dad always said that there were so many things that once he got done with school, it was just like same kind of
Yep.
realizations.
A
Like, oh
barrage of
God, they
reality.
don't tell you these things at all. Like not at all.
Yeah.
I was lucky at Berkeley. At least there was a taxation course, so I sort of had I swear that's the most useful course I took the whole time I was there. Was like, here's what a 1099 is. Here's how you do write-offs, and like,
Wow.
yeah, for real. Like my final was to do a tax return on my own with write-offs.
Wow.
Yeah, it was.
All right,
great.
that's impressive.
That is
Yeah.
impressive.
Yeah.
And I, that's the one thing they taught me that I was like, oh, real world stuff. Right, okay.
Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah, they didn't tell you anything about
real
how.
world, not real book.
Yeah. Totally.
So yeah, and I mean, I could hypothesize about other things, like, man, you know, what's it like? What's the implications on your family life? And blah 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 blah. Like, I don't know. Ask away, but I don't have any.
Yeah.
I don't have any concept.
Okay.
But you know, and maybe, and I don't know. Is there anything else like specific to like what is our daily routine out here that people don't ask? I feel like
I feel like something that needs to be, I think, put out a little bit more into the sideman world is that ego's still a gig. Like that's going to kill your career.
Yeah.
Like there's pride and there's knowing who you are and what you're good at and knowing your value and your worth financially and spiritually or whatever.
Yep.
But man, ego kills. Like there's a lot of young cats who are like Instagram famous who come onto a gig and like, man, I got 80,000 followers on Instagram. Well, your name ain't on the marquee, kid.
Right.
Like,
get
his
in the
name's
back.
on the marquee, and if you start bumping up on him, you're gonna be, out of a job.
Right.
Like the ego killer, or the ego is something that I think
Yeah.
that needs to be out there a little bit more.
And being a social media guy, I'd also like to point out, I know of bands with millions of followers that cannot sell a ticket to save their lives.
Dude.
And I work with ones that have like 60, 70,000 followers and can sell out a 1,000 seat venue.
Right.
That's
Like good for hard tickets. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
It's
No,
nuts.
absolutely true.
Yeah, and like I've met some sidemen. had some funny conversations where, like, I don't have a huge social media presence. Like, whatever, I got a couple thousand guys on Instagram, whatever. And I'll meet guys who have like 25, 30,000 Instagram followers, and they're like driving Uber. You know, like they don't have a gig and they can't really keep a gig, but they have this huge online presence, and it's like, that's not everything. Like, cool, you got these numbers, and that makes you, like, that's a nice ego stroke.
Yeah.
But can you keep a gig?
Yeah.
You know, and
Right.
sometimes I think that ego stroke gets in the way of them keeping a gig.
Yeah. Keep the gig and don't let school ruin your education.
Right. Yes.
That's a bumper sticker.
Yeah. My parents of a D student.
Right.
Yeah.